You know, the need for high-speed internet is a little bit like what used to be probably what my grandfather talked about, the need to have a telephone. It's pretty consequential.
Some of the government policies were going to lead to inflation.
I wouldn't say we agreed with them then, and we don't agree with them now.
My top priority is fighting inflation.
Jen Psaki saying that she doesn't agree that the government caused inflation or really played any role. Joe Biden's rolling out his Broadband for America. We'll talk about why some things are fine, but other things are terribly, terribly wrong with that. Gmail possibly censoring GOP emails, sending them to the spam folder. All that and more coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. My name is Jobob. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
2, 1.
Here we go!
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually her name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for tuning into Daily Caller Live on today. It is May 10th, the year of our Lord 2022. New you in 22. Jen Psaki had some comments about the SCOTUS protests standing outside of their house. We'll play that for you in just a little bit. But I want to talk about this broadband thing. A lot of internet-based stuff today. The president yesterday and Kamala Harris rolled out their plan, or at least gave a little speech. Excuse me, something's stuck in my throat here. About broadband across the country. Now, there's a couple different minds on this sort of thing. So, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris yesterday were talking about expanding broadband to everyone throughout the country. Now, the federal government doing that, probably a bad idea, but there are some interesting caveats / variables that I feel like you should know about and hear about. Watch this first from the president yesterday, talking about federal broadband internet, high-speed internet. It's a necessity, like the telephone, says Joe Biden. Watch this.
You know, the need for high-speed internet is a little bit like what used to be probably what my grandfather talked about, the need to have a telephone. It's pretty consequential, and they're only going to keep growing this need. High-speed internet is not a luxury any longer. It's a necessity, and that's why the bipartisan infrastructure law included $65 billion to make sure we expand access to broadband internet in every region of the country, urban, suburban, and rural.
We'll stop it there. There's a couple more seconds he's got there, but the one thing that I heard there in just my initial reaction to every government doing anything is broadband is going to get worse. That's what I heard when Joe Biden said, we're going to expand broadband to everyone in the country. Now, obviously, the federal government overhauling broadband is not going to turn out well. It's going to be a massive waste of money. The internet speed and service will probably be substantially worse. And nobody's going to say anything about it. We're just going to let it happen and just going to chug along. However, there are some interesting components to this broadband argument. While I'm massively, and while we should all be massively against the federal government doing it, because the federal government, again, is not good at doing things, which is the premise of this entire show, basically, or my, at least, view on the world. The government's bad at doing things and should therefore do less things. But when it comes to the federal government, obviously not good. However, there are some arguments to be made on the municipal level, the city, local level, providing Wi-Fi / internet / broadband services. The argument being made there is it's basically utility. The city manages water, electricity in a lot of places, depending on how your electricity is set up. In California, it is a crony capitalism scheme going on, so they manage the electricity. But they manage utilities. The city that you live in manages the utilities that you use. Internet nowadays is so ubiquitous and so everywhere all the time, and everybody's using it all the time, and it's seems like a pretty big necessity. I agree with the president there that the internet is a necessity. It would seem that some instances that the municipal cities and possibly even counties could provide broadband for a price to the user on the utility side. Now, not advocating for more government anything. I'm just saying it's an interesting argument to be made, and one that I think has some sort of ground. If the city that you live in wants to provide internet, that's fine. I don't care at all. However, this is also pretty interesting. There are 18 states, if you don't know this, that have total restrictive legislation against broadband networks in the US. So, even if the city that you live in or the city that I live in wanted to say, hey, internet is a utility now, broadband is something that's necessary for everybody here, we're going to go ahead and do a municipal broadband system and charge our users like we would charge them for their water or charge them for their trash pickup or their electricity or whatever it is that they charge for. They're not allowed to do that in several different states. Now, while I'm against federal government pushing things on, I'm also against a lot of state legislations explicitly restricting things without good cause for it. So why are some of these states restricting broadband connectivity through the municipalities? Well, probably because of crony capitalism. Now, if you're not familiar with crony capitalism, it's capitalism interjecting itself in the politics of the particular region they're working in. Basically, the lobby for your big connectivity broadband companies, your AT&Ts, your Verizon, your Spectrums, your Charters, all of those companies lobby those states' governments to say, please don't allow the cities to do this on their own because that would put us out of business. Now, there are some infrastructure comments to be made. Yeah, there's arguments of those companies have the infrastructure set up, and then would you lease that infrastructure and all that sort of stuff. All of that is what it is. The bottom line is this. It's weird that several states in the country explicitly don't allow local communities to purchase their own broadband. So while the president and issuing this federal broadband whatever is going to turn out bad for everyone, because it'll get worse and it'll be more expensive to the taxpayer, it is interesting that some municipalities can't do it. And I'm not necessarily opposed to them trying it. I'm more accepting of government, quote unquote, programs, if you're going to call it that, at the local city level and the community level. And the reason being the obvious one is you have interaction with the people who are making those decisions. Your city councilman, probably, unless you live in a big city, you can go knock on their front door. The city councilman that represents the city that I live in has their address out in the open, and you can go knock on their door and talk to them about local issues. So with that, if you're able to connect with those legislators in your municipality, then easier to get away with in terms of making things happen. I don't want to belabor on that because I want to get to the second internet story of the day. Is Google sending GOP emails to the spam folder? It kind of looks like it. This is from the Post-Millennial reporting on this. Republican committees have filed a complaint with the Federal Elections Commission after research at North Carolina State University Department of Computer Science found that Google's Gmail-marked emails from Republican candidates as... sorry, let me rephrase. Read correctly, Jobob. Let's get it together. Google's Gmail marked emails from Republican candidates as spam at an astronomically higher rate than Democrat candidates. So, if you're a Republican candidate, according to this study out of North Carolina State University's Computer Science Department, if you send out an email to a constituent or to a donor or to a potential voter or whatever it is, at an astronomically higher rate, that email was sent to the spam folder and nobody saw it. I, for one, am thankful for the spam folder in many cases. However, it should be used like every other tech platform is being hounded for at a consistent level and consistent rate. The findings were published in a study called A Peek into the Political Bias in Email Spam Filtering Algorithms During the U.S. Election 2020. Says exactly what it did. The study looked at 3 email servers Google Outlook, and Yahoo. It found that while all service providers displayed some disparity in marking Republican candidate emails as spam, Google did such a shockingly higher rate than the other two competitors. Is anyone surprised by that? I'm actually curious. Is anybody shocked by that? Google, by way of their algorithms, has the power to massively overhaul election. When somebody searches something, the thing that pops up at the front, if they tweak that just a little bit and show the Democrat candidate first and don't say that they're the Democrat candidate, or let's just put it on, if they wanted a Republican in any particular instance, they could do that then too and swing elections massively by minor tweaks to their algorithm. So this is saying that a huge study combining Google, Outlook, and Yahoo is saying that Google, on a much, much bigger scale, sent Republican candidate emails to the spam folder. The studies are shocking. All three service providers displayed some disparity, with Outlook marketing Democrat emails as spam approximately 27% more than Republican emails. Authors with Outlook marking. Interesting. Outlook marking Democrat emails as spam approximately 27 times more than Republicans. Democrats also send out more emails. If you're in the political world, at least it's my experience, the anecdotal experience of a political consultant in some way, shape, or form. I get emails from everybody, and it would seem the Democrats send out way more emails. Again, that's all anecdotal. In comparison, Google's Gmail truly stands apart. It marked Republican emails as spam more than 180. 180. I can't talk this morning. More than 820% higher rate than it marked emails from Democrat candidates, the FEC complaint explained. So there's some GOP committees filing FEC complaints, and I guess we'll see how that goes. I want to get to this. This is Jen Psaki yesterday in the White House press briefing room. Somebody asked her about inflation. I'm not going to belabor on this too much. Let's just, watch this clip. This is Jen Psaki yesterday being asked about inflation.
Go ahead.
As we look ahead to tomorrow's inflation speech, let me ask you to look back at some of the warnings that were issued last year by Summers and Ratner and so on. In retrospect, were they right that some of the government policies were going to lead to inflation?
I wouldn't say we agreed with them then, and we don't agree with them now. I would note that as it relates to actions like the American Rescue Plan, the alternative to not putting in place and advocating for the American Rescue Plan would have been the economy continuing to spiral, right? We were providing assistance and relief in the form of checks to people who needed that assistance at the time.
So Jen Psaki does not agree that the government intervention with the whole COVID thing caused inflation at all, or with no government policy caused inflation. That guy was saying, hey, there's a bunch of predictions a year ago, maybe even before that, saying, hey, all of these policies that are just printing money, and by printing money, I mean borrowing from the Federal Reserve, is going to make inflation go. But Jen Psaki says, no, we don't think that's a thing. Then Joe Biden, earlier in the day, followed up and said this about inflation, it being his highest priority.
The bottom line is this. My top priority is fighting inflation and lowering prices for families and things they need. Today's announcement is going to give millions of families a little more breathing room.
Spending more money.
Pay their bills.
So we won't listen to that entire thing, but basically Joe Biden was saying, my highest priority is inflation, even though Jen Psaki doesn't think the government inflicted inflation at all. Apparently the government can save you from inflation, so says the president. Kind of combating. I'm not entirely sure if that's an entirely fair argument, but it is interesting how Jen Psaki, one, does not agree that government policies caused any inflation, but Joe Biden thinks that government policies can stop inflation. So there is that. I also want to get to this from the White House press briefing room yesterday. Jen Psaki on some of the SCOTUS home protests. Let me just play this clip and we will go from there.
Go ahead.
Does the president plan to condemn the leak of the Supreme Court draft opinion or the doxing of the justices now that we've seen violence unfold?
Well, I would say that we have been clear, and the president's position has long been, that we should not see protest that takes the form of violence, that takes the form of vandalism, and that threatens anyone. That has long been his position for his entire career and continues to be his position.
And for tomorrow, your office released that...
But can I say one more thing? Sorry.
Please do.
We have not seen violence or vandalism against Supreme Court justices. We have seen it at Catholic churches. That's unacceptable. The president does not support that. We have seen it at some conservative organizations. That we don't support that. And we certainly call for, we know the passion, we understand the passion, we understand the concern. But what the president's position is that that should be peaceful, the protest. But continue, go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
Saying that,
Does the
Jen Psaki, they're saying that, well, it hasn't been violent at all at the Supreme Court justice homes, but I don't know what actually happens if they're actually home. I would imagine that most of the Supreme Court justices aren't home, which is a whole thing in and of itself. They probably have decided, hey, this is a little bit dangerous for us to be here. Let's not be here. I would imagine that that's the case, but it is a crazy world that we live in, that the Supreme Court justices are being protested at their very home. Again, the legality behind it, I'm not entirely sure how that works, but it's a precedent on a societal level and a cultural level that is going to not end well. I almost guarantee it. We've got to make way for the president, who is coming on to speak about inflation in about 10 minutes. So that's going to do it for us today. A couple minutes shorter than we generally go. But hey, we got through everything. So appreciate you sticking around with us, those of you who were able to do that. And we will, see you tomorrow. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media platforms. Would appreciate you doing so at JOBOB. Just type in JOBOB on any of the social media platforms, Getter, Twitter, YouTube, Truth, Instagram, Facebook, all of those. You can find me there. I will say this. I'm not trying to engage in debate club in the DMs section. I appreciate people sending me stuff, but if you send me 9 different things within an hour, I probably will not accept those messages anymore. Again, appreciate you doing that, but we're not hosting a debate night in the DMs on any of the social media platforms. That's going to do it for us today. We'll see you tomorrow. The president is coming up next to talk about inflation from, I believe, the Rose Garden, but I'm not entirely sure. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless America.